Hello, we're here to talk about Greenhouse Recycling. They are a provider of recycling and waste disposal services to industrial and medical customers in the US and Canada. Their main pain point is severe gaps in system automation and integration. And their main goal is a more integrated system, new digital services to customers. Assumptions at a high level are an unlimited budget, principle of least privilege, and buy before build. Org strategy, single org, no explicit compliance requirement was given for data residency. Unified business process across geographies. We're able to manage within governor limits. The ease of collaboration across all CRM data as needed is a benefit of this strategy. And then they have a global view of CRM data for reporting as well. They're multi-currency and multi-language. We'll talk more about that. The actors and licenses we have here, the waste specialist is going to be a platform license. They don't have need for sales or service objects. The support rep will be sales plus digital engagement for omni-channel and embedded chat. And then there's an SMS requirement. That's why I'm recommending digital engagement. The manager and driver manager would be Sales Cloud. A driver would be a platform as well for the same reasons. Manager will need access to this Sales Cloud data for reporting. External users will be primary and secondary customer contacts with a CC Plus license. Primary needs it for delegated administration and reporting, and the secondary needs it for reporting as well. The role hierarchy, starting at the bottom, the external roles, the primary and secondary, you can see secondary rolls up to primary within the customer, role per customer. And then their account is owned by the waste specialist, so the role rolls up to that role. Waste specialists have a role per office location, so 150 different roles. Location manager also has a role per location, and then that rolls up to a regional manager, which has a role per region. There's 15 of those. And then there's HQ managers above that with a global view of all this data. And then on the other side, there's support rep for US and support rep for Canada. All of these roll up to the CEO. System landscape. So we can see the firewall. Below that, there's on-prem systems. Above that, cloud-based systems. We'll start with Salesforce. So it's going to have an experience site for external users. It's going to use My Domain, Service Cloud Voice, Service Cloud, and Sales Cloud. We'll also be using reports and dashboards together with Tableau CRM as well to meet different requirements around reporting for our reporting strategy. And we'll be using Salesforce files for our document strategy. We've got a lot of licenses, so 12 terabytes total storage. That should be enough to have all of the files using Salesforce files and not need an off-platform storage. We'll be using Conga and DocuSign from the App Exchange as well. In terms of mobile apps, we'll have one for internal users. We'll use the Salesforce mobile app for that. Waste specialists and drivers will be using that app. And then for customers, we'll use a mobile publisher app. This saves us some risk of scheduling because we don't need custom development, mobile development teams here. The customers will be using Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter to log in with social sign-on with OpenID Connect. The internal users are stored in Active Directory identity store. We'll be making use of ADFS as the IDP here. We'll also be using Kerberos and IWA. Talk more about that later. The ADFS is the IDP facilitating SAML SSO into Salesforce, as well as the logistics systems and ERP, which is already a SSO that's in place. Next, there's a website that uses web to lead to create leads in Salesforce. And then in terms of integrations, we'll be using an ETL and ESB for centralizing our retry logic, our error handling, such as notifications to sysadmins and logging, orchestration, uh, orchestration for complex integrations, protocol translation, and transactionality across systems. They both use the JOT bearer flow to connect with Salesforce, and they both use two-way SSL to protect data in transit. The ETL will use the bulk API. ESB will use REST and Comet D. ETL will be used for larger data, less real-time, more periodic scheduled integrations. So we'll be using that for a data migration from lead database and ERP and desktop waste profile tool. And we'll also be using it to periodically archive Salesforce data into the enterprise data warehouse here. ESB will be will be more real-time integrations, lower data volumes at one time. It will be communicating with the logistics system and the ERP, which is, yeah, there should be a connection here. So they're on-prem systems. They've got the data warehouse. Lead database is getting retired. The desktop waste profile tool is getting retired. The ERP is partial retirement of CRM functionality. There will remain 2 of those and 4 logistics systems. Integrations we'll speak about when we get to them. The data model, so the legend here, master details are in red, lookups are in black. Then the custom objects are in blue. And so each square, so object name is in the middle, owner is in the top right, org-wise left, volume is in the bottom right, and then bottom left if there's LDV and how we're dealing with that. Org-wide default, P is for private, PRO, public read-only, CBP controlled by parent. And then the actors are the waste specialist, WS, and service rep, SR. So we'll start with the lead, which comes in. Everything is secure by default. So the lead is private, owned by the SR. There's about 1,000 a month. Some of them get converted to accounts and contacts. This should be private as well. For the recycling company, once they're qualified, contact is controlled by parent. They're both owned by the waste specialist. You can see the volumes here. They manage cases. I'm estimating 10,000 a month. The service rep is responsible for those as well. The accounts have they have locations associated with them, and they have waste profiles associated with them as well. Waste profile can have tasks off of that, which is owned by, it gets assigned to the waste specialist. The waste profile location is a junction object between these two, as there's a many-to-many relationship between waste profile and location. It also relates to the scheduled pickups, and the scheduled pickups belong to a route, which is owned by the driver, and it's public read-only. It's low volume. The pickups, so these 4 objects, location, waste profile location, and pickup, all have master detail relationships, which ultimately go all the way back up to account. So basically, the visibility is controlled by account. If you can see an account, you can see all of these objects underneath it. The volumes here, location 500K, waste profile, I'm estimating 500K, and waste profile location, I'm estimating 500K as well. Pickup as 1 million a week. That's our true large data volume object. We're going to need to archive these on a weekly basis so that the volume doesn't get too high to manage in terms of performance. We can also make use of skinny tables, custom indexes, and selective queries, list views, and reports on this object if performance becomes an issue. All of these are controlled by parents, so they don't have owners. Next, we'll move to the business requirements. So sales and profile setup is the first business process. This is the lead, begins with the lead. So submit an information request to create a prospective record, and assign and notify a support rep based on availability and geography. So all of this is going to be done with web to lead on the website. Lead assignment rules per support center, a total of 3, and omni-channel to push to the most available. So actually not Service Cloud, but Sales Cloud plus digital engagement license required for the support rep here for these reasons for omni-channel. Direct, they need to be, so they can also be directed to the support rep based on fee and the customer history available in phone calls. So I'm recommending Service Cloud Voice. I think I mentioned that in the system landscape. So that'll do the CTI routing. Customer initiated chat can be done with embedded service chat and queue-based routing. All of these, that's another function that comes with the digital engagement license. So there's 1,000 per month as mentioned. So that's under the limit of 500 web to leads per day. And then there's a questionnaire that ultimately creates an account for the customer in Salesforce so that they can complete their full app. This questionnaire can be done with a screen flow and lead conversion, and then an after save flow on account creation that enables the account and contact for communities, and calls Apex to create the user to avoid a mixed DML that'll be in a different transaction. A waste specialist automatically assigned. So the flow above I just mentioned can assign a waste specialist as the owner of that account and contact. After the creation, there's updates that need to be made in ERP. ERP is the system of record for certain attributes that need to be locked in Salesforce. So that's our first integration. So the same flow on account creation does a fire and forget publish a platform event, the ESB event channel via Comet D. Calls the ESB and creates the account, and then we use field level security to prevent the editing of those fields in Salesforce that are mastered in the ERP. There's no need for a response. That's why we're using forget pattern. Mobile device for the customer, they need to manage the locations, create one or more waste profiles for each of the locations. So, for waste profile creation needs to be highly interactive, built-in rules to confirm they can be disposed of according to compliance requirements. So this can be a screen flow process to walk them through gathering the information that's required. And then we can use custom metadata, store and evaluate these rules that it talks about and local requirements. So we can have a matrix that is used to store that information and make sure that record they're creating is valid. So the customer submits the waste profile for review by the waste specialist, which requires the waste specialist to visit a location, confirm the waste to be disposed. This can be an approval process and a task creation, as mentioned in the data model off the waste profile. This will be assigned to the waste specialist. On that site visit, they can take pictures or videos with their mobile device. They need geolocation as well. So the Salesforce mobile app can do all of this out of the box, or not out of the box, but with a Lightning Web component that makes use of the geolocation API to capture the geolocation. I've made an assumption that videos here are very short, maybe 10 megs, and are often not even needed. We can archive and we also have 12 terabytes. So we can handle this volume of files, and we can archive them to the data warehouse as soon as they're no longer needed. So basically, once the waste profile is finalized and approved, we can archive these tasks and attachments. The waste specialist can generate a complete contract. We can use Conga for document generation here. Upon the contract's creation, the waste profile is locked. So we can have a flow on that contract upload. the document upload that checks a checkbox field on the waste profile, and then a validation rule on that waste profile record that prevents edits when that box is checked. The customer can sign a contract on the specialist mobile device or log in later and sign it. We can use DocuSign for this e-signature use case. The customer can associate additional locations with the waste profile, and the waste profile needs to be notified. So combined with the earlier requirement, this shows that it's a many-to-many relationship between waste profile and location. So that required this junction object of waste profile location. When one of these records is created, as mentioned, we can have an after save flow that does a chatter post to notify the waste specialist. Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So we have to enable these as auth providers and then configure the login page to surface these options. And then it mentions collaboration. We can use chatter for that. Next business process is pickup scheduling. So one or more waste profiles are approved for the locations. The customer can request pickup. Customer cannot schedule pickup for waste profile that has not been approved. So we will be using a validation rule that prevents the creation of a pickup record if the associated waste profile is not approved. So it'll go up this relationship here to make sure it's approved. The customer could schedule service with the mobile device or browser that they have. So they identify the approved location and waste profile to schedule service for. If there's an existing schedule that description, they can select it or create a new one. It's an interactive scheduling tool with their preferences. They submit a requested schedule, and real-time integration with the appropriate logistics system will return the confirmed schedule. So all of this, a screen flow is going to walk the customer through this process and collect the information in a step-by-step manner. Then we'll have a Lightning Web component as the interactive scheduling tool that's described here with the rich UI. And then this screen flow will initiate our second integrations, which is request and reply using flow and external services to the ESB, to the logistics system, to as mentioned here, to request the routing. And if that is successful, then it comes back and creates the pickup record in Salesforce. It's a request and reply because we need that result right away for the next step in the business process. Then it needs to be visible to the customer immediately, so that justifies the request reply pattern. If for any reason the schedule can't be confirmed, then the request remains in an unconfirmed state. So if the integration returns a response that it can't be confirmed, the flow will still create the pickup record, but the field, there's going to be a field that indicates that it's unconfirmed. And we'll also have a flow email, after save flow on that record with an email alert to the customer. And then it'll create a case and assign that to the support rep with a case assignment rule. If they don't follow up in a predetermined time, escalate to management. So that'll be a case escalation rule. Then once it's changed, the logistics system needs to make a change after established by adding it to a new route, for example. The customer needs to be notified by email, SMS, or mobile notification, depending on their preference. So the notification preference, I'm presuming, is going to be a field on the account. We'll have another integration where the logistics system calls the ESB, which does a remote call into Salesforce REST API to update the pickup record. After save flow on that record, we'll look up the preference and notify the customer based on that update. And here's where we need the digital engagement license to handle the SMS use case. And I've made an assumption that the logistics system can initiate an integration here. Onto the third business process, pickup and disposal. Drivers follow a route route has a specific type of waste and a disposal facility. So disposal facility and type of waste can just be picklist fields on the route. The truck communicates with the logistics every 60 seconds to give its current location. When the location needs to be shown on a map and provide an ETA for the customer's mobile device. So we'll have a Lightning Web component that uses the map-based component and our integration request and reply to the ESB to the logistics system to get the ETA and location and plot it on that LWC map. I've made an assumption here that the logistics system has the ETA data available. If any issues, then the driver can use a mobile device to create a support issue, upload videos, collaborate with the customer and waste specialist to resolve. So they can use the Salesforce mobile app for this, create case quick action, use case teams and chatter for collaboration, use the files related list for uploads, and then archive these case and the files once it's closed. So the logistics does have, so it does have the ability to notify external systems upon completion of the pickup or completion of the route. And then consumers elect whether to be notified of the events or not. Contact will have preference fields for these. It will have another integration here. It's going to be the same pattern as before, where it's the logistics system to ESB to Salesforce. It's going to mark the pickup or route complete here. And then we'll have an after save flow on both of those records to check the contact's preference and notify the customer if they desire it. The nightly integration between the logistics and ERP systems will continue to function. So there's no change needed here. That's already in place. The introduction mentioned that. Data migration. Customer leads for the last 2 years should be migrated to Salesforce, except where they're in the ERP system as customers. There are duplicate data here. So that we need some deduplication logic. We'll have the ETL orchestrate this whole data migration. But we'll have the ERP data here will take precedence since they're already existing customers over lead, which is prospective customers. The customer location and account data from the ERP system, including an account hierarchy. So yeah, we'll make sure to we'll talk about this. We have a slide in a second. Logistics systems, all four have data that need to be replicated, schedule data into Salesforce. And note here that it's current data only, the rest can be archived. And then we have documents, so all the PDF, waste profile PDF documents need to be, the current ones need to be available from the desktop tool. So getting into the slide, so the two ERPs will supply data that can be used to create the account hierarchy, contacts, locations, waste profiles, and waste profile locations. The lead DB will supply leads. The logistics systems will have data that can be turned into the routes and pickups. We only need the current data here. And then the desktop tool, waste profile PDFs, the current ones only, which are content version object in Salesforce. And then we can create more content document links if necessary. This is also the sequence of objects we would be loading. And for the account hierarchy, we would be loading like the top level accounts that don't have a parent account, and then the second level, the third level, and so on in that order, so that we manage our dependencies appropriately and maintain the relationships. Other than that, this is the sequence of the load in terms of Salesforce objects. So we'd first bring from all these systems into a staging raw tables here, and which is we'll use the ETL tool to extract this and put it in staging raw format, and then we'd be standardizing, cleansing, transforming, deduping, enriching, and then sequencing the loads of that data and grouping each table by parent ID to transform it into the Salesforce schema shape staging database here. And then we can go straight to the archival, to the data warehouse for these routes and pickups, and then the waste profile PDFs that are not considered current. We'd work with the business to define what that means exactly. And then data that is going into Salesforce, we use the bulk API 2.0 to load first into 3 separate Salesforce sandboxes with increasing volumes, ending in a end-to-end full test into a staging sandbox that's a full sandbox. But before that load, we'd use the external IDs to maintain the relationships among the data elements. Before the load, we deactivate automations and validations in Salesforce, defer sharing and parallel sharing recalculation, and granular locking. We'd contact Salesforce to make sure all of this is enabled. And then we'd use parallel mode with the bulk API 2.0, do the load, and then we'd have some testing afterward to make sure that the process met its acceptance criteria. If it did, we'd reactivate automations and validations, resume sharing, and recalculate the sharing. Next is the visibility requirements. So waste specialists need to view and edit all customer and install data for their own customers. Waste specialists own accounts. I've made an assumption that the install system refers to location. The location org-wide default is controlled by parent. So that's how the waste specialist gets access to locations. Waste specialists need to view all customer and install data for other specialist customers within their local office, except the customer financial data. We'll have an owner-based sharing rule on account for each waste specialist role. It's 150 total to grant read access to members of the owner's same role for that location. For that office location. Customer financial data is, I don't think I actually spoke about that. It's going to be a separate object here, which is a org-wide default private. It'll be owned by the manager, and there's, I'm presuming, about 250,000 of those. Right. So next, yeah, just as I was saying, all managers need to be able to edit customers and service data within their respective areas, including financial data. So the role hierarchy grants this access, and then we need Apex sharing on creation of the case and on creation of the customer financial data based on the related accounts location / region. It will create shares to the role, the manager role that is associated with that location or region for the case and customer financial data to provide the manager visibility into those. We need to do that because the service roles do not roll up to these managers. And then while the financial data is owned by a manager, other managers need to see it according to this requirement. Drivers should be able to view customer and pickup data for all customers on their routes, past and present. So we can use Apex sharing to the driver who owns the related route here so that they can also see the customer contact location and waste profile data. Oh, sorry, on creation. So when this pickup is created, the Apex would get the related account, get the driver that owns the related route, and create a share of that account to that driver. And because these are all controlled by parent, the driver would then get access to all of these data that they need. Next, primary customer contacts should be able to edit their own customer contact location and waste profile data. So the org-wide default is private for account. Sharing set on account where the ID is the user's account, just to elevate their permissions from read-only to edit. And that'll also grant them edit access to contact and location via the master detail relationships. The role hierarchy grants edit on the, I changed that actually. So no, this will work the same way as the other objects. It's controlled by parent. Next, there's this external account hierarchy where primary customer contacts need to be able to see all account location, waste profile, scheduling, and subordinate data across all related accounts. And they should be able to schedule pickup services for these locations. We can use the set up the external account hierarchy feature in Salesforce, which will handle this sharing to the since it's the highest role in its account. It will get access to all the subordinate data for lower accounts in the hierarchy and their users. Support center representatives need to see all data within their geography, US or Canada, except for that customer financial data. So we'll have criteria-based sharing rules per geography. So that's 2 on each, on all org-wide default private objects to grant read access to these SRs. Fields will be needed for geography. So really, most of this they'll get through the controlled by parent. They really just need these rules on account, case, and lead. So those will have to have a geography field. Reporting. Internal users need to be running reports on sales activity, schedules, and services provided for customers they have access to. That can be done with standard Salesforce reports. Managers need ad hoc trending based on issues over the periods of time based on geography, customer type, business type, waste profile type, responsible specialist. This is complex, varying trending reports. It's not clear exactly what it means, but recommending to use Tableau CRM for this. For most trending reports, like reporting snapshots, you'd have to set that up ahead of time. We use Tableau CRM for this complex slicing and dicing of this data, some of which will be archived as well, I should mention. So it will probably be combining data from Salesforce, the enterprise data warehouse. All customer contacts need to run reports showing issues and statuses for their issues they have access to. This can actually be done with list views. It doesn't require reports, but those are an option since they are CC Plus licensed if needed. Customer contacts need to run historical reports in summary and detail of waste pickup history and billing history. So we'll use Tableau CRM as the pickups are a large data volume that'll be archived quickly. And also billing history. I presume that would be an ERP system. So Tableau CRM for this data that lives in multiple systems. It's going to require the CC. This is what the requirement that really makes sure that the CC Plus license is needed for the secondary customer contact role in addition to the primary. Since it says all customer contacts. They need a report live from the public website showing the number of customers by type and the overall volume of service. Since these are just counts, not fancy visualizations, I'm recommending the website team can build a request and reply integration via the ESB, which does a remote call in to Salesforce REST API to get these figures on the load of the page on the website. And I've made an assumption that traffic to this page is relatively low, so it's low enough that it won't impact or API limits for the Salesforce platform. Although that limit is very high because we have lots of users, both internal and C+. So I think we'll be able to handle this API load. Last section is project and development requirements. So English, Spanish, and French need to be available. So we'll use Translation Workbench, custom labels for any custom UI elements, VF email, Visualforce email templates for any email that needs to be translated, and we'll surface the language selector component in the experience site. GRC has 6 separate teams for the 2 ERPs and 4 logistics systems. These teams have a lot of autonomy and no central guidance. I have a slide for this I'll get to in a minute. Actually, we'll talk about that now. So a little out of order here, but no central guidance. So we need a COE, or Center of Excellence, to facilitate alignment on standards, processes, and then an ARB, or Architecture Review Board, to create the design standards, technical standards, and evangelize scalable design to address these issues from that requirement. Testing and deployment is currently manual, and that's impacting the ability to operate and meet regulatory requirements. So this is a severe problem here. It's mentioned here. So we'll go into more detail in the next slide, but or a couple slides, but we're going to require all teams to use a version control system, continuous integration practices, and automated testing to address these very serious requirements. It's not just the Salesforce team. All teams will be required to follow this, and the COE would be enforcing that. Sales management wants to simultaneously release the completed solution to production for all regions in 4 months. IT wants to take a phased approach. They want guidance on the optimal plan, how to prioritize and track the work. So for that last bit of tracking the work, we should use Jira to prioritize the work, communicate the priorities, and ensure traceability through release. The steerco needs to have this discussion of the big bang versus the phased approach. It is ultimately a business decision of speed of delivery versus the trade-off of risk. So big bang gets the value to more people more quickly, but it comes with more risk. If something goes wrong, it impacts the entire company. Phased limits risk and with a slower rollout. The 4-month deadline. So we need to define what is the actual MVP for that 4-month deadline with the steering committee. We definitely do buy before build, as I mentioned earlier. We don't have time for custom development really when we can avoid it. We'll use the steering committee will have to ensure that this project is top priority for all teams and we have the resources we need, and PMO will have to strongly escalate any delays and track them across all Scrum teams. This is also a highly regulated industry, is another risk I wanted to mention. So we'll be engaging compliance and legal in the COE as well. Last requirement here, they want recommendations how to address project priorities, technical design issues, team management, and organizational issues that may arise. I do want to add here, I forgot to mention earlier, in terms of a methodology, we're going to use a hybrid approach, waterfall for the deadline of 4 months, and immovable requirements that we know will not change, as well as we'll be using a contract first integration strategy to ensure that parallel development can proceed, and to help with the speed of delivery. And then we'll be using Agile for the Scrum teams that are actually building features. We'll be have a sprint cadence where they release quickly, demo features, get feedback quickly, and if there's any issues, we find out about them as early as possible in terms of usability, performance, things like that. Onto governance. Structure is going to be a steering committee led by an executive sponsor, which is responsible for the vision, priority, ensuring the resources are allocated, and handling any escalations or roadblocks, and clearing blockers for this project to be successful. COE underneath that will evangelize standards, promote adoption, facilitate enablement, circulate best practices, and promote knowledge sharing. It'll contain business and IT leadership, as well as compliance and legal, as mentioned, due to the high regulations. ARB, the Architecture Review Board, is responsible for creating design standards, promoting scalability, and creating the coding standards as well. PMO will be responsible for schedules, managing schedules, the burn downs, escalating any delays to the steering committee to have those blockers cleared. The change control board will prevent scope creep and manage approvals of any change requests. The Scrum team, you can see here, we have a lot of them. They'll have daily stand-ups and then periodic scrum of scrums for cross-team collaboration. Next, the application lifecycle management. So we'll start with developers working in their own Scratch orgs, building features, and then doing unit tests with Apex and Jest, then pushing into a version control, which is GitHub, and opening a pull request there. We use SonarQube for static code analysis on the pull request. Then Travis CI will deploy and run tests in this environment automatically. It's a dedicated CI sandbox, which is a dev sandbox. And that's auto regression testing with Apex, Jest, and also Selenium for key use cases. We'll be using the JWT flow to auth into Salesforce for this. Assuming those tests pass, the tech lead will do a code review and then merge the code into a dev branch. Then we'll be deploying from Travis to SIT, then UAT, then staging, then production in phased stages. So SIT first will be a dev pro sandbox. We'll do mocks and stubs integration testing, functional QA. We'll start doing small volumes of data migration testing here. We'll also, next we can deploy to UAT if there's no issues, which is a partial sandbox. We'll do user acceptance testing there. We can do system integration testing with lower environments of the ETL and ESB. SME testing, larger partial data migration as well. Next, we would deploy from Travis to staging, which is a full sandbox. We do performance testing, let Salesforce know in advance about that. Full end-to-end data migration test will take place here. And then we'll push to production and do smoke testing there. If there's any issues along the way in any of these environments, the defects would be fixed at the source in the Scratch org and then pushed back into GitHub. The pull request would be updated, propagated to any of these environments wherever we are, to the left of where we are. So changes are always going from left to right here through production. If there's any production support needed or urgent bug fixes, we have a dev sandbox for hot fixes. If any work is done here, it can be done and pushed into production more quickly, but also will be propagated back to version control GitHub and pushed to all environments ultimately. Here you can see a branching strategy. We've got a main, hotfix, release, dev, and then feature branches, and you can see a notional way of managing these branch promotions. And I'd like to conclude by adding a more detail on some of our identity flows we've been talking about. So SP initiated SAML SSO involving Salesforce and ADFS. The user's browser would request a resource from Salesforce, which would check for a session. If there isn't one, it would forward a SAML request through the browser to the ADFS, which would check for a session there. If there isn't one, the user would be prompted to log in. ADFS would prepare a SAML response, which is signed, pass that through the browser back to Salesforce, which verifies the signature, validates the response, grants a session, and returns a resource, which is the relay state, to the browser. And next, the JWT bearer flow involves the client and authorization server and resource server. Salesforce is going to be these two roles, and the client can be, in our case, the ESB, ETL, or the CI server. So the client is going to request a token from the token endpoint of Salesforce, passing a JOT token. Salesforce will first verify the signature, then validate the JOT claims, confirm the user has access to the connected app, and then prepare the access token, return that to the client. This is all back channel, and then the client can make API calls to Salesforce. That concludes my presentation. I believe Greenhouse Recycling can have a successful project rollout with the recommendations given. Thank you.